How can this be, you ask?
I've been running around saying time does not exist for many years. There are a few books out there that do a good job of illustrating this belief, and I thought I'd write a silly little webpage about my no such thing as time/or motion belief. I guess you'd have to say it's a belief. It can be proven or disproved in accordance with scientific theory, or can it? So it's not a theory. Can you prove a negative?
I'm going to try and explain the non-existence of time, and coincidentally the non-existence of motion, in simple terms. Sure, you can read about quantum physics and chaos theory in a book, but trying to understand it is no simple task. I promise not to make you do any math.
First and foremost, my beliefs on the non-existence of time began very early. In grade school math class, I did a project for extra credit. I described a four-dimensional cube to my class. Not all that difficult. Hypercubes have been part of math, physics, and geometry for hundreds, if not thousands of years. After the extra credit project, I began wondering about higher dimensional objects. I started thinking about shadows and lower dimensional objects. As I made my way through high school, I read a few other books about metaphysics. Eventually I formulated a few wild-eyed ideas of my own. Nothing I could prove, but something I've been describing to anyone who would listen for many years.
Time simply does not exist. I guess you could call me a materialist. If you can't sense something with your senses, does it really exist? Try to describe time, without using time as a reference. We can't see it, can't smell it, can't taste it, etc., etc. Are there any machines that can measure it? A clock? Really? What does a clock measure? The movement of its own hands. That's time. What does a clock really measure? Is time defined by the motion of our planet around the sun?
Let's get a little more interesting. If time does exist, when was it created? Did it always exist? Did it exist before man came along? Does time really slow down if an object approaches the speed of light? I seriously doubt it. Where does time slow down? Does all time slow down? Just the time around the object moving near the speed of light? I thought time, or for that matter the speed of light, were supposed to be universal standards. And with some explanations.
I'm not all that good at math, so don't expect me to recite formulas or provide any type of mathematical proof for my harebrained ideas. Others have already tried that. I tried to follow their math, but all it did was give me a headache. If you want proof, you might want to try a simpler subject.
The basis of my crazy little ideas can best be defined through the basics of quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. Once again, I'm not going to try and provide mathematical proofs or formulas of any sort. If you'd like to see that sort of thing, I suggest you check out a good quantum physics book. These theories about time not existing rest primarily on the belief in the existence of multidimensional universes and the simultaneous coexistence of these multidimensional universes.
First off, let's start with what we know. You know that you exist, right? Okay, that's good. If you're not willing to admit this, you've got some bigger problems to deal with. Next, you must admit that you are a three-dimensional person/object. You have height, width, and depth. Okay, we're on a roll here. Objects in our immediate plane of existence can be defined as having 3 dimensions. Humans can detect objects that coexist in the same dimension, multidimensional universe, as them. We exist in a universe which is defined by 3 specific dimensions. Let's call them X, Y, and Z. Everything in this universe can be defined through expressions of these 3 dimensions. Are you with me? Good. I'll take it that you believe and understand what I'm saying.
Let's expand on this a little bit. Solid objects in our universe exist within a 3-dimensional framework. They have varying X, Y, and Z dimensions that define their existence. Can we sense objects that do not have 3 dimensions? Sure we can. We can see 2-dimensional objects. We define 2-dimensional objects as having only 2 of the 3 dimensions that we can sense. So, humans can detect both 2 and 3-dimensional objects. We can detect objects that are not fully 3-dimensional. We've just begun the journey. We can detect objects that are not fully 3-dimensional, objects within a multidimensional universe which overlaps ours, but we cannot detect objects that exist wholly outside our subset of 3 dimensions.
Two-dimensional and three-dimensional objects can coexist simultaneously without interfering with each other. If something casts a shadow on a three-dimensional object, the two coexist simultaneously. The shadow occupies the same physical space as the solid object without displacing it, no sidetracking on the other effects at this point. So here we can see that multidimensional objects can coexist simultaneously within the same space. A two-dimensional object and a three-dimensional object can occupy the same physical space.
Time to expand on that simple fact. Are there more dimensions than X, Y, and Z? I believe there are. We humans are simply not capable of sensing these other dimensions. We have no biological capability to sense these other dimensions. Perhaps shadows are objects which consist of dimensions W, X, and Y, but we can only sense the X and Y dimensions of these objects. They overlap our universe in dimensions X and Y, yet exist fully in a different universe. One that is slightly offset from the universe that we exist in. Overlapping, simultaneously coexisting, multidimensional universes.
You may have noticed that shadows are duplicates of three-dimensional objects in all but one aspect. They lack a third dimension, or that third dimension cannot be detected by us. This adjacent and partially detectable universe is nearly identical to ours. What if these coexisting multidimensional universes differed from ours in relation to their dimensional divergence? Nearby frequencies universes are nearly identical, while highly divergent universes are much different.
Our universe overlaps these other universes, but we cannot detect them. They coexist within the same framework, but are separated by dimensional frequencies. Our universe resonates at dimensional frequencies.
See you at the second part.
See you next time.